President and CEO, Dr. Melanie Johnson, I'd like to welcome you. Dr. Johnson sends her deepest regrets that she's unable to join us today. She's been selected for jury duty. She's committed to having conversations that empower women, children, and the community. So we're especially grateful to Linda Roach for the opportunity to partner with the Women's Fund to bring you Doc Talks. It is our hope that by hosting conversations about health, wellness, and innovation in medicine, that it will impact the city of Houston on its journey to becoming the healthiest city in the nation. I have the privilege of welcoming a face familiar to our entire community. Award-winning anchor for ABC Channel 13, Gina Gaston. Gina, on behalf of our CEO and President, Dr. Melanie Johnson, and our entire team, welcome back to the Health Museum. Last year, the Health Museum had the honor of working with Gina, who served as co-chair for the Never Count Us Out Women's Luncheon. The event raised critical funds for the museum's educational programming and also raised much needed awareness about limb loss. It was a beautiful and successful event, and we appreciate your contributions. We look forward to working with you in the future to make a difference in our community. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the podium our moderator for this afternoon, Gina Gaston.
That's it, okay. Well, it's certainly my great pleasure to be here with you today, and it's my first chance to get the chance to meet Dr. Ferrari. So many of you I'm sure heard about him, but thank you so much for being here today, along with your beautiful Paula. There she is in the back. Thank you for letting them come hang out with us. We have a serious and fun discussion to be had today, and the wonderful thing about it is I know once I got here, I got a chance to learn a little bit about some of you, and I know that many of you know a lot about cancer already. And so we want you to be the driver of this conversation. So I'm merely a conduit to call on names, really. So we'll get started, but I do want you to feel like it's your opportunity to learn, and I'm just here to help navigate that. So do you want to start with an opening statement? We have, as our title, a cure for breast cancer. So why don't we start there?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. It's a delight to be here. I'm very honored to be here with all of you. I'm at your service. Today, for the conversation, as Gina kindly said, any questions that come to mind, just raise your hand and ask me. I will say a few things to get started, but I'm here at your service. We can take this conversation any way you want to take it. And, this is just the beginning. Many of you have met before, but of course, if there is anything that we can ever do to help and assist in this type of matters, you let me know. We are servants. That's the spirit with which I approach my profession. I am fortunate to be a Houston Methodist, where I served as president and CEO of the Research Institute. And I had to run the hospital as executive vice president. But I'm very fortunate, like we all are, to be in this great city of Houston. It's the #1 healthcare destination in the world, the #1 medical center in the world. And no matter which way you look, all of the medical institutions here are sensational. So it's be that in the Anderson, where I served for a number of years, the University of Texas Health Sciences Center, where we were partnering with Memorial Hermann, as they still do. And I can keep on going, Baylor and the great universities that we have here, St. Thomas and Rice and Western Houston, and the list goes on and on. Here, Texas Children. This is just a blessed city with so many breakthrough opportunities for care, for prevention, for research, and for community involvement. Now, I've been in many places in my life, and I consider myself very blessed that I've been able to serve on the faculty of some very important universities around the nation and around the world. That Houston is really the place. It's so very unique. And one of the reasons why it is so very unique, and I consider myself so fortunate to be here, is the notion of involvement by the community. We see it at all sorts of different levels. And today is another great manifestation of that. So thanks for welcoming even somebody with his accent in the great city of Houston. You may have noticed the word cowboy boots. There's no way I go anywhere without cowboy boots. I don't care if I'm in New York or Paris or Milan. I always have cowboy boots because I really consider myself very fortunate and blessed to be with you all. And thanks for your interest in breast cancer. Now, I spent the last 25 years of my life working on women's cancers. That is what I work on in my lab, in particular breast cancer. So I will tell you some of the experiences that we have learned from those 25 years. I call that the journey of 25 years of failures. And I say that with pride. It's a long journey. It's a difficult disease. There's many, many different diseases actually wrapped under one name and one rubric. Many, many, many different diseases. But it is from learning, from the successes that people have had along the way, and from the failures that we have all had along the way, that we can aspire to come to the day where the generation after us, I tell my children, will be able to live in a world where the word cancer is no longer a death sentence for everybody. So let's not be afraid of the defeats and the difficulties. Like President Kennedy famously said in this great city talking about the space program, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Remember that? Slightly different accents, right? That was not my best impression. But there was great depth when he was talking about, of course, space exploration and going to the moon. And he said that, meaning there are moments in history where we are privileged to be perhaps the only group that can really make a difference, that can bring benefit to millions and millions of people, to all of humankind. And if we are so lucky to find ourselves in those circumstances, to the good graces of the Lord and His generosity, then we have the responsibility to dream big, to shoot, to aim high, do the best that we can. So I'm here to share this comforting thought with you, in which I really believe that the time is coming soon, that the word cancer will no longer be a death sentence for anyone. Now let's talk about breast cancer.
Yeah, so we were talking, the title of the program is Cure for Metastatic Breast Cancer. How close are we? What is the technology we've got now that we feel most encouraged?
So, and it's a great honor to be here on stage with you too. It's a great, please take pictures. Please take pictures. So, of course, just a couple of words. Some of you have spoken to several of you before, and you are great experts in cancer, so you don't need me to go through some of the basics. But just to make sure that we are all on the same page, of course. My perspective is, that's a perspective that many share, is that the word cancer is actually many, 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 many different diseases. And we have fixed the same name to all of them because there are some things that they have in common. The reality is there are so many more things that they have that are different from one another, even from person to person. Even within the same person, as the disease evolves over time. That I think the word cancer is a word that is going to go away over time. Have you ever heard of the word hydropesy? Probably you never had. It was a word that 200 years ago, 300 years ago, was a catch-all word that meant the diseases they had to do with the stuff that's approximately around here. Beethoven died of hydropesy. So probably under that word, the doctors of the time were referring to things that probably they were cancers, but other diseases as well. Whatever built up fluids in your belly. That's a word that nobody knows anything about anymore. I think the word cancer is going to disappear. And you will see a world where that word is not as important anymore because other words come in that are more clearly identify the different types of diseases. So looking at breast cancer, one thing that is in common, unfortunately, to all cancers, one of the things that we call the hallmarks of cancer, is the fact that if you give it enough time, most cancers tend to create colonies of cancer away from the site of origin. We are talking about breast cancer today in particular. So breast cancer origins called breast cancer because it originates in the breast in multiple different locations. All locations are potential sites of initiation of the disease. And on breast cancer, a primary breast cancer, we can intervene successfully, providing a cure surgically or even by radiation only sometimes, but surgically for sure. That's the strategy of choice. It can be more invasive, less invasive, there are different strategies, but surgically, if you can take it out, take it all away early enough, the vast majority of patients are cured. Here is where metastasis becomes important. For all cancers, if you give it sufficient time, some of the cells will figure out a way to travel from the site of origin and to go to other parts of the body. And they do that by catching a ride along the blood circulatory system or through the lymphatics. And for what pertains to breast cancer, the most frequent sites of metastatic disease are the lungs, the liver, bones, the brain, but lungs and liver in particular are very, very important. If you look at the numbers, many women that have breast cancer, the majority of women that have breast cancer, will not die of that disease. So it can be cured completely, and it is in many cases. Unfortunately, when the disease becomes metastatic, then the numbers drop precipitously. Because if there is one metastasis in the lungs or in the liver, usually there are many, 10, 100, who knows? And they are all a little bit different from one another. So when you come in with the drugs that we use to fight metastatic disease, they will be effective against some of those metastatic deposits, some of those lesions, but many times not against all. That is the big problem. Is this one starting cancer, again to summarize, in the breast gives rise to many cancers in the liver and in the lungs. At that point, those cancers are all pretty different from one another. And that is why we use cocktails of chemotherapeutic agents, a combination of several different drugs, so that some can get these, some can get those, some can get the others, and hopefully we can cover them all. But many times, unfortunately, we do not have a combination of drugs or a sequence of combination of drugs that can bring people to be completely cured of their disease. There is a wonderful thing that we call a remission. Remission is where there is no clinical evidence of the cancer any place, and that's a great thing. Remission may last forever, but in many cases it doesn't, if we are talking about metastatic disease. And so here is the challenge. Can we figure out a strategy to completely eliminate metastatic lesions? In the lungs and the liver, most important, if you look at cancer deaths, not only breast, but of all cancer deaths, the majority come from metastasis to lungs and liver. No matter if it originates from the breast, or from the colon, or from the skin, or from other places. Lungs and liver are very important because they are a receptacle, they are a target region where the metastases flourish. And once they become too big or too many, then of course you cannot live without the liver, without your lungs. So that is the moment where things really go bad. So your question was, what is there that we can hope for? In general, there is one approach that looks very promising, is the approach that is called immunotherapy. It's teaching with stimuli that are in the form of drugs or cells, teaching our body to recognize all those cancer cells that are spreading metastatic disease around the body, and then having our own body defenses, our own immune system, turn on them and attack them and kill them. That is a strategy that I think is very promising. It has shown that it is very effective in certain other diseases, unfortunately. For instance, in skin cancer, melanoma. For instance, in lung cancer, immunotherapy works really well. But in cancer, so far, we have not seen great successes, statistically speaking. The percentage of breast cancer patients that benefit from immunotherapy is small. Just for certain types, even within those types, not very many. So we call that the breast cancer being cold to immunotherapy. There are approaches that people are working on these days to find a way to make immunotherapy also effective for breast cancer. And I think immunotherapy is here to stay. We get better and better and better. We'll be able to cure patients that are otherwise incurable in many different types of cancer, including breast cancer. So we'll be one set of important weapons in the armamentarium that we have to fight cancer. Again, it is something that we use with surgery, with all sorts of other things. It's one of the weapons, not the fundamental weapon. So that is one trend that currently has everybody excited, and you've been reading about this. I want to talk to you about something else too. Mary?
Yes.
All right. And that is my 25 years of failure story, if I may. Not because it's mine, as a matter of fact, it's a right that has been shared literally by hundreds of people working with me. And if it wasn't because of them, I wouldn't be here telling you the successes. So the failures are all mine, but the successes are hundreds and hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people, 25 years worth. So it turns out that when I started working on these types of diseases, about 25 years ago, it was a bit of a conversion. I was a professor of things that had to do with engineering, math, and physics at the University of California in Berkeley, the People's Republic of Berkeley. I had long hair and a beard and all that stuff. Okay. And then all of a sudden I got an internal call to action. Actually, all of these technologies that we were developing for all sorts of other applications could actually be used against cancer. So I looked around and I learned that the biggest problem in cancer back then, 25 years ago, was that, hey, nobody can cure metastasis. And hey, mostly it's lungs and liver. So my encyclopedic ignorance of the disease at the time helped me say, sure, let's do that. Oh, we are bringing in something different. Perhaps we can add the dimension to the fight. And we just jumped right in. Of course, a smarter person would have said, are you kidding me? Everybody has failed at this. We gotta do something else. Low-hanging fruit, right? Well, I remind you of President Kennedy. I didn't even know back then. But I think crazy enough sometimes is a good idea. So we said, okay, we're going to do something else. I hear that the drugs cannot cure cancer metastasis to lungs and liver because the drugs, if you inject them IV, don't make it to all of those metastases. They get blocked in other parts of the body. And they hurt other parts of the body. You never get enough in the right place. So as we said, well, how about we try to put those drugs into little particles? And those little particles, we make them really, really small, and we kind of teach them some tricks so that they can find their way to those cancer lesions that otherwise are unreachable. At the time, we were making things that were small on what we call the micro scale. You know why? Because nano, which is smaller than micro, hadn't been done yet by anybody. Next thing you know, gentleman here in this great city of Houston by the name of Rick Smalley, trust you've heard of him, together with a couple of colleagues, Bob Pearl and Sir Croto, across the street here at Rice University, made some transformative discoveries that gave rise to the field of nanotechnology. And nano is really small. I couldn't get as small as nano back in my days at Berkeley, so we were doing microparticles that carry drugs to the cancer. And I'll tell you the first failure. Microparticles don't do what I was hoping they would do. They do a number of good things, but they cannot cure metastatic disease. Failure number one, your count is much more.
Oh, okay.
But then this guy Smalley says, hey, we can go nano. And he discovers a number of ways to go smaller and smaller. And so we said, fine, okay, let's try the nano way. And we started looking at nano for cancer therapy for medical applications. I think we're probably the first group to do that, or among the very first to do that. So we started doing nanoparticles for drug delivery. And a few years after that, I was called by the National Cancer Institute in Washington, D.C., is the federal body that deals with cancer research, all of cancer research in the nation. And they asked me, given that I had some experience, if I would put together a national program in cancer nanotechnology. I said, sure, I'm at your service. So we moved to Washington, D.C. with Paula. Spent a couple of years doing that. Rick Smalley was advising us on this because he really knew nano. He won a Nobel Prize for that, right? So he really knew nano. And a number of other people were working on this, so we launched the program. Now, 13 years later, 10%, approximately 10% of all cancer drugs that are used in the clinics in this city and worldwide are nano drugs. 10%, astonishing. So nano drugs can work really well for many cancers, and they are used all over the place. And they can help extend lives, they can help with quality of life, they can help with many things. But there is one thing that they cannot do. You know it. Cure metastatic disease to lungs and liver. Same as chemotherapy, same immunotherapy so far. Same as molecular targeted therapeutics. Cannot, radiation therapy, surgery, you name it. Metastatic disease continues to escape. So second failure, nano, some good things have happened, but still we cannot do metastatic disease. So we started looking, 10, 15 years of looking. Why? Turns out that the problem is the same. Even the nanoparticles cannot reach the right places because the traveling through the body is complicated. The body's got traffic laws that are incredibly smart. I'm not going to make a comparison. Right? Very, very smart. They need to direct the right molecules in the right place, the right cells in the right place. That's how you keep health and that's how you fight disease. For instance, nothing can make it up to your brain unless you're supposed to, right? That's a good thing. So traffic patterns are very important in the body. So turns out that in cancer, those traffic patterns are completely disrupted. As a matter of fact, I think that's what cancer is. It's a disruption of traffic patterns for molecules, for cells, for drugs, for nutrients, metabolites. So we said, let's start looking, let's develop the science of the traffic patterns in the body. We call it, that's something that you need to do, led by clinicians, working together with biologists, pharmaceutical scientists, that's the people that you expect. And then a bunch of other characters, physicists, engineers, mathematicians, chemists. You know, that's the kind of the world that I come from, because they provide you with additional tools. And working together, not one against the other, all fields together, you can come up with your solutions. So this new science that we came up with is called transport oncophysics. It's the physics of transport of things inside of cancer. We have been fortunate here in Houston to receive the first funding for the first National Center in Transport Oncophysics. And we have shared that with some of the other great institutions here, MD Anderson, UT Health, UT Galveston actually as well, and others, Baylor. And now we've just got the second center, which is one that deals with transport oncophysics for immunotherapy. So all of this is making good progressions. Third failure, I haven't found that transport oncophysics cures metastatic disease to lungs and liver yet. But now I'll come to the fourth and last part. Sorry, I'm speaking too long. Throughout all of this failure after failure after failure, which may actually give some benefits along the way. But the failures is what drives you crazy and keeps you up at night. So we find, man, that if I put those nanoparticles inside of the tumor, they go to the right place. They kill the cells that normally survive chemotherapy and bring the cancer back. We call those cancer stem cells. But I have too many. If I have a patient, a normal metastatic patient, has cancer everywhere, in many places. I cannot go and inject it in all of the metastases. I don't even know where they are. So I need to go IV, like you normally do for chemotherapy, and the particles don't get to the right places. Once they are inside of the tumor, they travel right to the right places and they kill the right cells. But they can never get there because they are stopped at some of the gates of traffic control of the body. So how do you solve that? Fast forward a few years, and working in the lab with a guy called Haifa Shen, and Zhu Hulu, and a couple of other people, hundreds of other people. So the idea came up that perhaps if we cannot inject the nanoparticle and make it go all the way to the tumor, we can feed the tumor the ingredients, the pieces that the tumor can use to make the nanoparticle that will kill it once and for all. It's kind of like the Trojan horse story meets IKEA. So you give them the tools, the instructions. Of course, the cancer doesn't want to do that. You have to figure out some strategies using things that the cancer cannot keep from doing. Uses thermodynamics or things. Never mind the details. So we came up with a crazy idea. And then we tried it on animals. On many different animals that have one particular type of breast cancer that is particularly aggressive and metastatic, and it hits mostly younger women. So it's a particular one that I hate with a vengeance, what we call a triple negative type of breast cancer. So we developed animal models, several animal models that have triple negative breast cancers. And they develop metastases in lungs and liver, like people do. And then we try to give this new drug that is actually the ingredients that get together inside of the tumor, make a nanoparticle, and go to the right cell and kill it. Next thing you know, we found that 50% of the animals were cured forever. 50% of the animals. Tried it on hundreds of animals, 50% are cured forever, and the other 50% lives 3 times as long as those that have the best of drugs that we usually give in the clinic. So I could have published a big article on the ones that died. But let's focus on the ones that lived for a moment. Let's think big. 50%. The result was so stunning for us too. But it was so stunning when we took it out. In science, before you make an announcement, it has to be peer-reviewed by people in the big journals, the referees, the reviewers, very, very stringently. So we sent it out to the best possible journal in the world on these things, one of the Nature journals, Nature Biotechnology is called. It took us 3 years to convince them that the data that we had was real, and to explain to them why it worked, because it was so new. It was so surprising that anybody could cure reproducibly 50% of metastatic animals cured. The cancer disappears, and they go to live as long as the other, their little mates, their little sisters that were born at the same time, and they go to live the long and happy life, never had cancer to start with. If that's not a cure, I don't know what is. So 50%, so 3 years to publish that, of fights, I don't want to tell you, but it's kind of funny, it was the way science works. Essentially, they were telling us, come on, it's impossible. What do you mean impossible? We are looking for this. So, all right. And then on the wake of that, we were able to go to another federal program by the Department of Defense. It's a great program on breast cancer research. And from them, we were able to get $16 million, the largest grant ever, so that we can take this thing to the clinic. So we were the only group in the nation that was awarded that grant. Right now we are working together with MD Anderson. We are developing the drug in a way that is pharmaceutical grade for FDA approval, and we are looking at getting into clinical trials together with MD Anderson, sometimes very soon. I'll tell you one secret. From the moment you see those results on those mice, life is no longer a job. At that point, it becomes a mission. Sleeping, all the stuff, eating, drinking, whatever. It becomes a different story. From that point on, the sense of responsibility that kicks in is unbelievable. In particular, because on average, in this wonderful country, that is the best country in the world for these type of things, you want to know how long it takes for a discovery, a proven scientific discovery, in the lab to become a clinical product? Anybody would like to guess?
10 years.
Try 17. 17 years on average. This comes from the Congressional Budget Office, not my numbers. And it takes $3 billion approx. And and with all the patients that we see, with all the real people, with real stories and real families, this is not about science, this is about service, it's about mission. So this story of the 17 years, unacceptable. So when I had the great fortune of being called up to Houston Methodist to pick up the research institute, it was at its early stages. So when I was asked, what would you do with me if you were the lead of this thing? My answer was, and it still is, figuring out a way to cut down this translation time, it's called translation, from 17 years to the minimum necessary to ensure safety and efficacy, to do things the right way, the minimum necessary, and I think the minimum necessary is 3 to 5 years. I don't want to run you through the numbers of how many people die of this disease, but I can assure that 3 to 5 years, just looking at breast cancer, the numbers are numbers you don't want to go to sleep with, thinking that you had a chance and you did nothing about it. So the good news is, from the moment we published that paper in Nature Biotechnology to the beginning of the clinical trials, forget the 17 years, chances are we're going to be able to make it inside of 2. Not with $3 billion, but with $16 million, not billion, dollars that came from a federal source, from the US government. So I think I cannot promise that this drug will work. It is possible that we try it with our clinical trials the best possible way, safest possible way, and it is possible that we find toxicities that we could not see in animals that actually show up in people, or it is possible that the drug will not work as well in people as it does in animals. And so this will be a historical curiosity, scientific curiosity, and nothing more. Failure number 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, or whatever. But my promise has been that we are not going to let process failures keep this drug from getting to people. It has to be the science. It cannot be process failures, as it is in 99.9999% of the cases of things that could benefit people in the clinic but never make it because it takes too long and it costs too much. And if I hope there is a legacy from this, even if this drug does not work, is that I hope we will have shown the way to shorten this timeline and make it cheapest so that other people, smarter people, can apply it to all sorts of other drugs. That's what we are all about at Houston Methodist Research Institute. I promised to speak 1 minute. I spoke about 3 hours and a half. So let me shut up and turn it over to
You never promised 1 minute.
You should.
This is a good chance for me to open up questions that you might have. I'm sure many of you have questions. I know you came in with questions, yes.
I really enjoyed your discussion and how you were calling it failures, but it's not. You know, we're learning the failure is a failure if we don't learn what we did. So, you know, I think we should have said failure. So, you know, the immunotherapy thing is very interesting to me. Basically, my great-grandmother had cancer, and my grandmother's sister had cancer.
We have a microphone for you.
I'm a personal wellness chef, and my name is Anisha, and I'm on a mission to help educate people on how to use food as medicine. So, you know, as a research doctor, scientist, you know, with all your experience, you know, what can we do as a community? Because I think community really makes a difference. What can we do as a community to educate people? So how do we use our own bodies? When we get a cut, our body normally just heals itself, right? The blood stops bleeding and it forms a scab, and the body heals. So when somebody's body is growing cancer cells, something is off. What is off? You know, how do we find that out? And that's very personal because probably each person's causes are different. You know, what percentage is genetics and what percentage is lifestyle? And how do we use our body to do that immunotherapy? Like we're saying, we're using science to deliver nanoparticles and immunotherapy to the cells that are spread to other organs. So how do we use our own body? Like what do we give our body that's missing? For each person, it could be a different thing. For one person, it could be toxins, or it could be lack of sleep, or it could be years of stress. I don't know. There's a lot of causes why people's bodies are not able to heal the cancer cells, like you said, and immunotherapy is basically going around and using the immune system. Are the same concept, right? Is that right? So if something is missing in our body, what do we do? How do we address that? And how do we use it to prevent cancer, right? Prevention is better. You know, we can really reduce the numbers if we can educate people on taking care of our bodies. We just have one.
Thank you very much. That's a great question and wonderful points you're making. I wish I could give you better news. The reality is that we have some general understanding of what causes cancer. There are some things that we know for sure cause cancer. High radiation, for instance. Pretty much every time a person or an animal is subjected to very high doses of radiation, then the cancer comes 99.97% of the times. Just making that up. For everything else that we do, there are risks, there are probabilities, and they are all conflated with each other. We know that smoking is very bad for you. That we know for sure. We know that smoking and drinking together is very bad for you. We know the low-level, minute amounts of proper amounts of little things can be good for some people and bad for some other people. It is all very personal. I don't think there is a general prevention strategy that works for everybody. Like we need to personalize therapy. We need to personalize diagnostics. We need to personalize screening. We need to personalize prevention strategies. So as much as we all would like to say, look, if I eat these magic carrots, I'm going to be around all right forever, we know that the answer is not that simple. I think it's natural for all of us to try to hang on to something near miraculous that can keep us. And we know that there are some things that have to do with the diet, that they reduce the incidence in some groups of people, perhaps in most people. I can assure it's never in all people, but we don't know which is which. So the general recommendations that are made for things that are healthy, we all know about them. We know that, of course, smoking is bad, excessive drinking is bad. You want sugar, obesity is bad, lack of exercise is bad. We know that all of the states that are immunodepressed, including things that are induced by moods, by stress, by those things, are associated with greater resurgence of cancer. So all of that we know, but we don't know how to personalize. So we can give broad categories of advice to people, and it's good. And those are things that we all should do. Try to stay away from certain viruses. if we can somehow, right? And all of those things are very important. So those broad classes of advice, I think, are important, but they should not be overplayed, because the reality is that the causal, personalized link for everybody is a long ways from being understood. And as much as I, of course, applaud all of those that give recommendations on lifestyle, which are good, great, important, to the best of our knowledge, we all should be following these guidelines. I also want, in parallel, I want to add another thought. Sometimes I see people come to me and they tell me, look, I've done everything right. I had this cancer. I know I'm going to die. I think it is because that time I didn't eat the 3 magic arrows that I was told to eat. Or maybe that time I had a full bottle of wine to celebrate my daughter's birthday, 18th birthday, or whatever it is. Little things. And so on top of the pain and the anxiety and the agony of carrying the burden of the disease and facing an uncertain future, these people also have the burden of thinking, I brought it upon myself, I am guilty, I've done bad for my family, and I am, it's a punishment for the lifestyle that I was not able to follow exactly right as I was told. And reality is that we don't know the science to an extent, to the point that anybody can really say that, or that we can never tell anybody, this is what happened. So reality is that many cancers are just random mutations. Many. We don't know how many. One of the best cancer groups in the world, at Johns Hopkins, 2-3 years ago, put out a paper that calculated it was perhaps 70% random. Now they kind of walk back a little bit, and perhaps the number is different, but it's not important, 70, 60, 20, 10. The concept is always the same. Let's find a way to give the good message so that people can live as healthy as possible lifestyle without burdening them with unwarranted guilt. Because it's a bad thing to do to people, and also because the guilt, I have a funny feeling, I don't know it for a scientific fact, but I have a funny feeling that it makes your cancer worse. So let's be honest and realistic, but let's live as healthy as we can. To the extent that we know, which unfortunately is not as much as we would like. So let's also call that fact and that reality, so that more people can work on this and make new discoveries and advance the science that is necessary, so that we can make recommendations that are really ironclad. Today, other than the obvious things that you know, don't expose yourself to radiation, don't smoke, no, try not to get those damn viruses. Do the things, the vaccination, anti-cancer vaccination, great. Do all of the screening that the doctor tells you to do. We don't have too many things that we can do for screening. Of course, we got mammograms, we got the colonoscopies. Do those. Are they perfect? Heck no. No, of course, prostate exams, do those. Are they perfect? Heck no. Do they miss a lot? Yes. Do they lead us to unnecessary treatment many times? Yes. The only thing we got, let's evolve it, but let's continue to do those, of course. But do we have a screening test for brain cancer? Do we have a screening test for pancreatic cancer? Do we have a screening test for metastatic disease? When the metastases come? Heck no. So I think it's important that we know where we are, so that all as a community figure out a way to work together to attack those frontiers. That's what I'm thinking. Thanks for this wonderful question. Yes, ma'am. I speak so long, I'm sorry. I speak too much. Can somebody ask me a yes or no question? That I can prove it to you that I can be successful.
You have important things to say, and we appreciate it very much. My question is, why are women allowed to present with metastatic disease? The continuum of care for breast cancer is you finish treatment, you're watched for 3 months, you're watched for 6 months, you're watched for a year. At 5 years, you graduate to preventive care. you have to actually, if you've had a mastectomy, you actually have to practically beg for a mammogram on the affected side. If it recurs on the affected side, then you go into more treatment, and triple negative is very aggressive. Particularly for triple negative women, there is no PET scan, there's no MRI, there's no anything that is the standard of care. And in the cancer world, the sooner you find it, the better. And the stories you hear of women who present with metastatic disease are that they've gone into their doctor with a backache. And then they will do a PET scan, and you have it all up and down the spine, or in the brain, or in the lung, and it's everywhere. So why are we not also working? What do you hear from your colleagues with regard to preventive metastatic disease?
Fantastic, thank you. I could ask the same question. I would ask the same question you asked. But let me break it down a little bit. Of course, chemotherapy is used in multiple different settings, as you well know. The notion of adjuvant chemotherapy, the chemotherapy that you get, or the hormonal therapy that you get, people get right after surgery, is exactly designed to minimize or reduce the risk of presentation of metastasis. I would venture to say that has saved many, many, many lives and has kept many, many women and men, cancer patients in general, present with metastatic disease. So that's a setting that I think has proven helpful, if you look at the numbers in the clinical trials, has proven helpful in keeping the metastasis from forming or from catching and really growing. That is one part of the story. That's the good part of the story. Unfortunately, there is another part of the story that is not good. I agree with you that it begs the tremendous question: why are we not being more aggressive in imaging, for instance, in trying to find the metastatic disease as early as possible? And I agree with you that in many situations that is not done. I would tell you, of course, I don't know all of the doctors in the nation. I've tried, but I would venture to guess that near to a person, all of them would like to do that. The limitations are not in the decision of the doctor. The limitation is on what is allowed per reimbursement protocol, be that from a private sector, of course, insurance company, or from the prescription side in the federally provided healthcare, of course, coverage programs. And the reason why, unfortunately, those protocols are written as they are, is that the observation is at this point that metastatic disease can be slowed down. But in general, I'm never going to say never, but in general cannot be cured. So the historical attitude has been 2 months earlier, 3 months earlier, 6 months earlier. It doesn't make any difference. I am not saying that. I am agreeing with you. Heck, it makes a difference. It makes a difference because the earlier you catch it, the better are your chances for extending your life, having better quality of life, and perhaps catching the next wave of innovation that comes in, that perhaps one day could cure you. So I am completely with you that we should throw everything we got at catching metastatic presentations as early as possible. And if you want that joining, going out and convincing insurance companies, the federal government, and everybody else that really governs these type of decisions. It is not the doctors.
We're down to about 5 minutes.
Can I make a comment on that? So as someone who just recently went through this and asked my doctor for a PET scan, I was told she was more than happy to write it and do the PET scan for me. However, she told me if it were to be picked up on the PET scan, it would have been so far advanced that you're not actually catching anything earlier with the PET scan for it to show on the PET scan. So that was the reasoning behind why it's often not provided in that situation, because by the time you're picking it up on the PET scan, other things would also pick it up, and it's so far advanced. So it would not be preventative in that
So
case.
that depends on the situation. But
Yeah.
so here is the balance you need to strike. You need to balance on individually, of course. And then there is the consideration for the overall impact and cost of the operations and whatever else. And those conversations become very difficult. But I am always erring on the side of more, as opposed to less in my personal perspective. But then on the other side, it's easier for me because I'm not running an insurance company, right? Yeah.
Do we have time for one more quick question? It's about 4 minutes. Anyone have one last question?
Over here. Let's do two.
Okay, two more quick questions.
I guess to piggyback on her question, you know, a lot of people have like those cancer markers, blood work done. Would that give you an indication any earlier than something would show up on a scan? And do they do those more routinely than they'll do the imaging?
Thanks for asking. There are many programs around the world now that are looking at that. And essentially they look at two things. They're looking at blood tests that have to do with circulating tumor cells. You find circulating cells in the body and they see if there is any tumor cell circulating, they may not be that there is a metastasis. It may not mean that metastasis is going to take and grow. So even identifying them, our immune system is able to suppress the vast majority of them. So for many situations, they are not a concern. So correlating which ones and how many actually give rise to metastasis or correlate to metastasis is a difficult scientific question for which we don't have an answer. The second approach, same problem, is circulating DNA. Find circulating DNA. The technology platforms are very similar, so people are starting to do both. So I think that's a direction. That's an important direction. I don't think there is anything at this point. There is a surefire, broad use type of strategy, but you will see that pending will be certainly important. Certainly important.
Final question in the back there.
Hello, I'm in high school, but I do have a question. For the treatments you already have for cancer, such as chemotherapy, why don't you focus on improving it? Because of course you're coming out with new drugs, but until then, people are still, of course, going to be using chemotherapy. And from what I know about cancer, people who do go to do chemotherapy, they end up getting cancer, if not in the same place, but in somewhere else. So I'm just wondering why don't other people focus on improving what is already out there? Because you of course coming out with new drugs, but we still have chemotherapy there. People are still going to be using chemotherapy, so that's my question.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Using the existing drugs, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Thanks for asking that. So there is a full direction of science these days that is called drug repurposing. It turns out the drugs can be useful for things other than what they were developed for. There is a whole bunch of scientists all over the nation that are actually looking at that right now. But at the end, and there are some good discoveries. Some that we don't have time to talk in greater detail, but I think that's another important approach. See, at the end, let's go to where we started from. Cancer is a billion different diseases. We need many different approaches to cover all of them, and what you recommended, drug repurposing, is also very, very important. Can we end by introducing somebody who wants to introduce?
Of course you may.
Ashley,
You're liked, so you may.
I met this young lady half an hour ago. Can you tell your story? Do you mind?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ferrari. My name is Ashley Dedman. So my experience with breast cancer came by experience. 3 generations of women in my family all died from breast cancer, the latest being my mother. She died from stage 4 metastatic breast cancer when I was 21 years old, shortly after my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And after he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I began to ask questions. I really felt like I was next. I felt like cancer was my death sentence because I knew my family history. And so I went to my OBGYN and I shared with her my family history. And she suggested that I get genetic counseling, which I did. And I found out that I had the BRCA2 genetic mutation. And so that was at the age of 22. So at that moment, I ended up seeing a high-risk oncologist. And I had surveillance pretty much over the last close to 10 years. During that time, I had MRIs, ultrasounds, transvaginals, probably over the course of 2 times a year. And of course, life happened. I got married. I had a baby. I had the opportunity to breastfeed, and it was a good opportunity, but it was painful at the same time. And so at that time, I felt like I can't keep this up. I can't keep up surveillance. I'm in and out of the doctor's office. And so, I constant prayer and being in agreement with my husband and talking with my doctor, I decided to have a bilateral prophylactic mastectomy. I had that December 16th of 2016. I had a reconstruction March 2017. And it was a hard decision, but knowing my family history gave me knowledge. And when you know better, you have to do better. And so knowing this knowledge helped me to have an action plan and to attack it before cancer attacked me. And so when we talk about prevention is important, and having those collaborative conversations with your provider, knowing your family history on the maternal and paternal side, identifying rare, young, and multiple cancers in your family, and knowing what's best for you and knowing what's best for your family at that time. And so being a wife and a mom, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer because it got to that point because she forgot about her health. Because being a wife and a mom came first. But what should have come first was her health. And now that I'm a wife and a mom, I had to take action. I knew better, so I had to do better. And prevention is a whole lot easier and cheaper than treatment. And so I just had to be proactive. And it was the best decision of my life. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not here saying, you need to make that same choice. But that's the choice that was best for me and my family at that time. And I knew that disease had taken away 3 generations of my family, and I didn't want it to take away my legacy.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing. So, because the reason why she did that is that if you get that mutation, you are 6 times more likely to get breast cancer. And the breast cancer that you get is more aggressive, tends to metastasize. We don't have specific drugs that work very well with that type of cancer. So there was a number of risk factors that she took into consideration, and she made her own personal decision so that there wouldn't be a risk that the disease would come and would then metastasize. Of course, that's a very painful decision, and I applaud you for being willing to share. Thank you so much. You are wonderfully generous. And my commitment to you couldn't possibly be that we are going to have the drug to make sure that people can access it in the future, people that are in the situation of being with that type of mutation that always carries triple negative, or for people with any other type of disease with metastatic in liver. I cannot promise that. But one thing that I can promise is that we are not going to let processes stop us. But I can also promise you that I cannot do this by myself. We need to do this as a community, which is why we work so much with the advocate community, with the patient community, and which is the reason why I was so happy to have this invitation, so that I can recruit all of you to come and work for free for us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Gina, who forgot to mention she's on our advisory board, and so we're so pleased to have you here. And Dr. Ferrari, what a wonderful conversation. If you want to see this, we will have the video. It's been streaming live on Facebook, so you can see it again. But we need a few days, and we will be putting it on the womensfund.org, our website, so you can view it again. We're real excited to bring this Doc Talk series to you in partnership with our friends at the Health Museum. And I do want to let you know, we do not have a date yet, but we are planning our third in the series of Doc Talks. It will be in the April-May time period. And we are bringing together Dr. Wanda Mott, who is an OBGYN, works on high risk in surgeries and deliveries, and Dr. Sean Blackwell, or someone from his team from UT Health, along with others like Marcia Dimes and the Texas Women's Health Coalition. We're going to have a conversation on the maternal morbidity rate, which Harris County leads the nation. So I know a lot of us are past the childbearing ages, but I think it's a very important conversation that we need to have and we need to communicate out to the public. So that concludes our Doc Talk today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.